So before, welcome to this student cafe. And before introducing our speaker of the day, let me share with you some reminders. Um, I would like to um, emphasize the mission of the student cafes and the Society of Ethnobotany. And our mission is the mission of our organization is to foster and encourage scientific research, education, and related activities on the past, present, and future uses of the plants, and the relationship between plants and people to make the results of such research available to the scientific community and the general public. Also, I would like to remind you that if you are not a member of the Society of Ethnobotany, you as a student, undergraduate student or a graduate student, you can join the society. And if you come from developed nations, or you have also options for asking like for donated memberships, I will share the email if you are interested in having that information. And also some advantages of becoming a member of the society include the online subscription to the society quarterly journal Economic Botany. Also, you can be eligible to submit manuscript to the Economic Botany Journal. We have invitations to members only events. And also you can be eligible for grants and awards to support student research. Okay, and also I want to remind you, or also to invite you to the next annual meeting. Next year we will have the annual meeting in Montpellier. So please become a member and join us for the next annual meeting. Okay, those were the reminders before the presentation. So now I'm extremely excited to present our speaker of the day. She's Dr. Maureece Levin, and she's an assistant professor of anthropology at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Dr. Levin is an archaeologist and an archaeobotanist with interest in food production, systems, historical ecology, niche construction, socio-cultural change, and archaeological pedagogy. I can't pronounce that word in English, so I'm sorry. Archaeological pedagogy, education. So her research methods focus on archaeobotany, which includes macro remains, phytoliths, and starch grains. But also she includes a wide variety of archaeological materials in her studies, as well as ethnoarchaeological data. Dr. Levin has worked on questions of ancient food cultivation strategies in Micronesia for over a decade, but her current work extends over several regions, including ongoing projects in Arkansas. And also, Dr. Levin, she completed her PhD and master in anthropology in the University of Oregon, and she has a bachelor degree in anthropology at Whitman College. So thank you, Dr. Levin, to join us and share with us this time for presenting some of your research. So now the stage is yours.
Hey, thank you so much. So I am going to share, wait a minute. Okay, there's share. Okay. All right. So hi, everyone. Today I'll be presenting on plant cultivation landscapes of Micronesia. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my research, and then talk a little bit about some of the projects I have been involved in. So to introduce myself, I'm an anthropological archaeologist and archaeobotanist. And basically, the main thing I study is human-environment interactions and food production systems over long periods of time. My work has mainly focused on the Pacific Islands. That's where I did my dissertation work, research, and a lot of my postdoctoral work. But I've worked on topics and projects related to many different regions. So I've worked on a lot of work related to East Asia, and also I have a project in Arkansas now that I really only started about 2 years ago, and I live in Little Rock, Arkansas with my spouse and our senior Chiweenie mix. So I want to start by introducing archaeobotany, because I know that people are coming from a wide variety of different fields in the Society for Ethnobotany. And so I wanted to specifically introduce archaeobotany. And basically, archaeobotany is the study of relationships between people and plants in the past. It's looking at interrelationships. So it's trying to understand basically through the archaeological record how humans interact with the plant world. And so I've included just a few of the ways it has been defined here. And it is used often interchangeably with paleoethnobotany. This is a field that looks at things that matter to people for all kinds of different reasons. So here's just a few examples. We've got some examples of things like people care about diet. And so it looks at things like the paleo diet. It can look at things like drug and alcohol use. Some of the research that I've been involved in is actually related to alcohol use in East Asia in the past. And then we can also learn about looking at the past to help us to feed the world in a sustainable way as our populations grow and the climate changes. So I want to give you an idea of what my career path looks like, because I didn't just go straight from undergrad to grad school into a faculty position. I had a little bit of detours along the way. So basically, I got my bachelor's in anthropology, and I minored in Japanese at Whitman College, which is a small liberal arts college in Walla Walla, Washington. I ended up taking a few years off before I started my doctoral work. So I worked in Japan as an assistant language teacher in rural public schools on the JET program. But then after that, I realized I really did want to go back to school. And I ended up doing my master's and PhD in anthropology at the University of Oregon. My work was primarily focused on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia. I also did a little bit of additional training in Australia to learn phytoliths. I was a postdoc at Stanford University for several years, working with Professor Li Liu in the Chinese archaeology lab. And after my postdoc, I did a little bit of contract work and a little bit of adjunct teaching, primarily staying in Northern California. And after that, I took a position as a full-time lecturer at Valdosta State University in South Georgia for a year. So I moved across the country. And then that brings me to UA Little Rock, where I arrived in 2022 as an assistant professor of anthropology. So that's kind of my winding career path. So my first field experience in Micronesia was as a master's student. This is me and my colleague, Dr. Catherine Sleichel, who I actually continue to work with. We just co-directed a field school together in Micronesia this summer, and this is our first field experience in Micronesia in summer 2028. So basically, what I study and what I'm going to talk about here is the anthropogenic niche. And so I'm looking at human relationships with their local environments. I study the way that people produce food and whether they do so sustainably or not. And I'm interested in plant domestication and the way that people develop agricultural systems. And I'm interested in this from a long-term perspective. So I'm studying the past, but I'm also really interested to see how it connects to the present as well. So the things that I do, I'm trained as an archaeologist. And so my work involves a lot of standard field archaeology, archaeological survey, mapping, and excavation. But I also do archaeobotany, and I look at plants like plant remains like charred macro remains. I look at phytoliths. So we have some phytoliths pictured here. These are some banana phytoliths up top, and then these are from a grass. And I also look at starch grains to an extent. Finally, I include ethnoarchaeology in my research. And what that basically means is that I talk to people to understand how they farm with the aim of engaging that information to better understand how people farmed in the past and connect that past and present, to use that to better interpret the record and also to better understand kind of what people need. So I talked about phytoliths a little bit. So I like to address this question of what a phytolith is, because a lot of people ask me, what the heck is a phytolith? So basically, the words, if we break them down, are just plant, stone. Phyto is plant, lith is stone. And this is just silica that is absorbed into the intracellular and extracellular spaces of plants. It's SiO2. This is material, that is going to be in the soil. Plants absorb it. And when the plant dies, organic material rapidly disintegrates, but silica doesn't. And so this can leave behind portions of what is often taxon-specific silica. Now, it's not always taxon-specific, but there are cases where we can use phytoliths to understand what plants were growing in a particular environment. So one of the islands that I'm going to be talking about today is Pohnpei, and this is a high volcanic island that is located in the Western Pacific, just north of the equator. And it is a fairly large island for Micronesia, but it is actually a very small island in the scheme of things. It is surrounded by a large lagoon. So you can see in this little inset here, we've got this large lagoon with this barrier and fringing reef. So it has the barrier reef along the outside, and then it has a fringing reef along the island, along the shoreline of the island. The other island I'm going to be talking about today is Pingalap. And so this is a coral atoll that is located about 270 kilometers to the east of Pohnpei. It is about 1.8 square kilometers. This is an overhead photo, so you can see just how small this is. This meter box is 1 kilometer. The entire island is 1.8 square kilometers, and it really only rises a few meters above sea level. And so these are quite different environments that are located in kind of the same area of the Pacific. So what I'm interested in is how food productions systems are embedded in broader environmental and sociocultural systems. And so I look at things like the way that gardens are organized. I have looked at type and frequency of archaeological features, for example, breadfruit fermentation pits and yam cultivation pits. I looked at food preservation practice and food preparation and cooking. So one of the things I'll show you today is some examples of earth ovens. So a few examples of the stuff that I work on, because this is the student cafe format, I wanted to give you just kind of a little taster of some of the things I work on rather than trying to center it around one particular study. So the first example, I'm going to talk about earth ovens here. And so earth ovens are used across a lot of the Pacific. And these usually consist of a few major elements. We have our heated stones. We have our food that gets cooked, both meat and vegetables. And oftentimes there'll be a layer of leaves and other moist material that's on top of them, and a layer of soil that can help to heat things up. So this is an example of a Maureece earth oven from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And these are a little different than the earth ovens that I look at. The major difference here is that Pohnpeian ovens that I'm looking at in Micronesia are generally not subterranean. So we can see that there's actually this is actually dug down, and these hot stones are put in here. But usually Pohnpeian ovens are more on the surface. So you have the hot stones that are actually set on the surface. And this can actually affect preservation and interpretation. So when you come across it in the field, it's going to look a little bit different as an archaeological site. So we have this roasting in this surface level rock oven. Locally, it's called an spelled like this, and it's generally located within a cookhouse structure. One of the things that we see is the use of large leaves in cooking various materials. Research on earth ovens has been going on. Archaeological research on earth ovens has been going on Pohnpei for a while. So my doctoral advisor, Bill Ayers, actually did research here in the late 70s and early 80s, looking at cookhouses on other areas of the island. And so one of the things I wanted to consider, though, is I wanted to look at the archaeobotanical data, and because no one had really done a lot with that on this island, at least. And so I wanted to consider what kinds of archaeobotanical materials would be recovered and how we could interpret those. So I worked at a historical earth oven first. So I actually talked to people who knew of an earth oven that had been used in historical memory nearby. And I did plant macroremain and phytolith analysis from this earth oven. And so we have some real clear indicators that there was breadfruit cooking that was going on at this earth oven. We have several fragments of breadfruit exocarp that show up in the deposit. And we can see this real clear concentration. The cooking surface is at about 20 to 30 centimeters below the surface. You can see just in the charcoal that gets recovered, there's this enormous amount of wood charcoal in the 1 millimeter fraction. So this is basically if we put everything through a 1 millimeter sieve and we take a look at everything that's in there, the mass of this material is very, very high. Most of that is wood charcoal, and we are getting a lot of breadfruit exocarp fragments from that as well. One of the other things that shows up here is that we see banana phytoliths that are also showing up in this context, especially in the 20 to 30 centimeters. And so this is suggestive that there was cooking of breadfruit going on in this particular context. And so this is characterized by breadfruit exocarp, banana leaf phytoliths, and also large quantities of wood charcoal. So one of the things I wanted to do was to take a look at an earth oven that was a little bit older. And so I went back and I looked at another earth oven site. And this is something that I actually did not do in my dissertation, but a little bit later. This is a house feature. POC39 is what we think was a household structure. And so feature 1 is kind of like this household, what looks like the foundation of some sort of a structure. And then feature 4 is these 4 stones that are lined up in this square. And so these are all exactly the same distance from one another. And then looking on the surface there's lots of charcoal on the surface. And so we interpreted this as potentially being a cookhouse structure. And so we went and carried out a 1 by 1 meter excavation here. And you can see that this really supports that hypothesis. We have our layer of burning here. You can see this mass of charcoal, and this is at the same layer on all the walls. And we have this layer, this real dark red layer, and then we even have post holes in the wall here. And you can even see that there's flecks of charcoal, just the quantity of charcoal that was present in this deposit. So this was the profile from that. And so we sent in a few dates. And so this ended up being a lot older than the earth oven, the historical earth oven that we had looked at before. So this looks like it is roughly 925 to 725 calibrated years before present. Yeah. The phytoliths that we recovered here, we saw a little bit of evidence for some banana. So this is like a little banana phytolith here, but there's a whole lot, there's a fair amount of variety, but a lot of it seems like it's really just kind of ambient material. It wasn't particularly informative. We have some sedges here, and we have some palm, and we have a lot of grasses that are showing up and from the upper layers. But we don't see a lot of particularly informative material that's actually coming from from a lot of the cooking layers at this site. You see something similar for the plant macro remains. We see that the cooking surface is clearly at about 30 to 40 centimeters. There was no breadfruit exocarp that showed up in the cooking surface here. And so this is a little bit different, but we see a lot of nutshell fragments and then parenchymus fragments that we haven't gone through and identified those yet, but they may represent some sort of root vegetable. But of course, we have to go through and identify those to figure that out. But we can draw some conclusions at this point from earth ovens. So we know that these Pohnpeian style earth ovens have been used for at least the past 800 years, and they're clearly used to cook plant foods. The historical site and prehistoric site are somewhat different in the archaeological record. The historical site has this clear indication of breadfruit cooking, the prehistoric site less so. But I think one thing we can learn from this is that understanding these models of food production, understanding how people are producing things, understanding the ethnographic record should directly inform the methods. When we're working in regions where the predominant mode of production is arboriculture, like Micronesia, so a lot of the plants that are produced here are plants like breadfruit, banana, and then root vegetables like yams and taro. Direct evidence of food production can be a lot more difficult to identify than it can in regions where you have a lot of, say, grains. And so a multi-proxy approach is going to be best for interpreting the record in this type of environment. The second example I want to give, and this is based on a lot of the work I did in my postdoctoral years, is long-term settlement of Pingelap. And so atolls are really different environments than high islands. Atolls basically are what is left of the coral reef when a high island subsumes beneath the ocean surface. So we have our example of atoll formation here. Basically, a volcano will grow over millions of years. Then a coral reef forms around it. And eventually, over the course of millions of years, it subsides. But of course, the coral reef is still living. And so the coral reef, it keeps building up. And ultimately, the volcano subsides beneath, but we have these coral islands that are left at the surface. And they are very, very low. So they don't really tend to rise more than a few centimeters above sea level. Atolls can be really difficult places to live. They have low elevation. They tend to have much lower biodiversity. So one of the things I've tried to do is a little bit of plant survey on both Pohnpei and atolls, just to get an idea of what the plant diversity is like. And the number of species on Pohnpei is pretty significant, even in these heavily managed areas. But on Pingelap, the number of species is pretty low. When I would when I would choose a location and then look at the plant diversity in the surrounding area, it might be in single digits. So we have pretty low plant diversity. There's also low access to fresh water. Most of the fresh water is obtained either directly from rainfall or from the freshwater zone in the Gibbon-Herzberg lens. Basically, freshwater is not as dense as saltwater, so a freshwater lens sits on top of this, and you can dig into the freshwater lens and get the freshwater. And one of the things that people do a lot on coral atolls is they will dig this big pit, and then they will grow these aroids in these essentially giant swamp taro in these big pits. Generally, these atolls were available to settle from about 3,000 years BP if we're looking at changes in sea level, and atoll formation and human modifications have actually made atolls more amenable to habitation. So people have brought in plants and animals that are useful to them. So one of the things that we did when we started working on Pingelap, so this is my colleague Kat again that you saw in the first photo, and she came out to work with me on Pingelap. And she actually works in cultural resources management now, but she still takes time to collaborate with me on these projects. So we are putting in a 1-by-1 test unit in one of the higher areas of the island, because a lot of the reason why elevation develops on these atolls is because people have been living there for a really long time and they keep throwing stuff away in these places. And so we actually have this elevation that builds up. So we ended up putting a 1-by-1. We would not have put in a 1-by-1 if we thought it was going to go 3 meters down. I do not recommend doing this usually in the field. If you think you are going to have a unit this deep, make it wider. So this is what our stratigraphy looks like, and we actually have dates going back to our earliest date is 1700 to 1550 Cal BP, and we have our dates slowly increasing. We do have one inversion up here, but generally the stratigraphy seems to be pretty good. But interestingly, there is actually materials coming from below this layer where we got this date. And we terminated excavation basically because we were getting really deep and there was an enormous coral rock, and we decided that it wasn't really safe to keep digging anymore. So it is possible that stuff could go down further. But as of now, these are the oldest dates that we have. A few years later, we went back, put in another test unit nearby, and here we did seem to reach kind of sterile soil, actually a little bit shallower, but our dates are not quite as old, but we still have these dates that are from the first millennium CE. A lot of the environmental data coming out of this includes things like fish and shellfish. We're looking at birds. My colleague Amy is looking at birds and fish. We have plant remains coming out of this, and we have land snails as well. So I actually have a student who's been doing some land snail analysis, who's been showing some significant changes in land snail populations on the atoll. So Pingelap is this anthropogenically constructed landscape. We see settlement from 1550 to 1700 Cal BP is the earliest that we see, although it might go earlier, and is likely to have been continuous. So we have dates from archaeological sites throughout the sequence. One of the things that it looks like is that ecological engineering by humans actually allowed agricultural plants to flourish. So humans raised elevation of the island by a significant amount just through this accumulation of these middens. We see soil formation happening. So in, for example, the Aroid pit that is dug for the taro in a lot of the central area of the island, we see this this nice soil getting formed. It's getting formed in other places. There's just a lot more organic matter than there is in areas that are less intensively farmed. And we also see evidence, of course, for continuous and extensive fishing and marine hunting. So my colleague Amy is working on this and looking at a lot of the fishing practices. So finally, we also on Pingelap, we've been looking at modern fishing and farming and using this to better understand the archaeology. So we've talked to multiple participants on Pingelap. I know that this sample size looks real small, but something to keep in mind. There are about 170 people that live on the island full time. So this is actually a pretty significant percentage of the population. And we talked to 11 men and 3 women across a pretty large age range. Actually, the 81-year-old that we interviewed was somebody who wasn't actually going out and managing plants herself anymore, but she wanted to talk to us about it. So about half of them had lived on Pingelap their whole lives. Some of them had lived on Pohnpei or lived abroad on Guam or even in the US. So I talked to them about what types of foods that they grew. So almost all of them grew banana, breadfruit, coconut, pandanus, and giant swamp taro. Some of these other plants that are mentioned, so sweet taro, for example, is Colocasia esculenta, which is the type of taro that is really famous in a lot of Polynesia. If you go to Hawaii, most of the taro that's grown there is going to be Colocasia esculenta. And these are mostly the plants that more than one people mentioned. They're all plants that were introduced by people who would have settled this region prior to European contact, except for papaya, which is an introduction from the Americas. So people mentioned dead leaves as being the most common fertilizer. although people also added fresh banana leaves and other parts of the plant. Adding topsoil was really common as a fertilization method. And one of the things that also came out is that people were saying most plants do not need constant maintenance. Taro is the plant that most people seem to spend more time maintaining, but most plants, people were saying they just plant them and then they come back and they eventually have food. So there is kind of a lower level of maintenance, but with giant swamp taro, this higher level of maintenance is needed. So I participated in some taro farming with one of my local consultants. And so this is his taro patch right here. He goes out to his taro patch a few times a week, and he invited me out with him to work on this. And so what he's doing here is he's placing these layers of mud at the base of each plant, and then he's putting some dead grass and dead leaves on that, and then putting more mud on it. And so what that does is it fertilizes the plant and helps to improve the soil. So this is more kind of in progress photos of that process. And then finally, lately, I have been talking to folks on Pingalap about potentially developing a museum display there. And so some of my consultants on Pingalap had mentioned to me that they were interested in potentially developing a museum and related to traditional culture. And this would include both modern products and materials that have been recovered archaeologically. And so this is something that is kind of in the very beginning planning stages, but this is me with some of my Pingalapese friends on Pay the summer before last, talking about that. So I kind of wanted to finish up with this quote from Apeli Hauolfa, who is or was a Fijian and Tongan anthropologist, and he reminds us that the world of Oceania is neither tiny nor deficient in resources. It was so only as a condition of the colonial confinement that lasted less than a century in a history of millennia. Human nature demands space for free movement, and the larger the space, the better it is for people. Islanders have broken out of their confinement, are moving around and away from their homelands, not so much because their countries are poor, but because they were unnaturally confined and severed from many of their traditional sources of wealth, and because it is in their blood to be mobile. So basically, traditional ecological knowledge in these oceanic contexts allows for long distance travel, the literal building of the landscape. We see this especially in the atoll context, as well as sustainable farming and fisheries management. It's important to remember, a lot of people talk about these islands as kind of this pristine tropical paradise. Oh, they're surrounded by this bounty, but it's important to remember people created this bounty. This is a carefully constructed and managed landscape. So I think that it's important to keep this in mind, because when we talk about sustainability and economic independence, these are really important factors. Understanding that people have this knowledge of maintaining the environment, we can demonstrate that this has been going on for a really long time. And we know that climate change is something that is impacting islanders in ways that are, and it's impacting all of us in ways that are unprecedented, but it is disproportionately impacting people in the Pacific. So kind of getting a handle on what some of these systems have looked like long-term can help to move forward. And I think it's also really important to remember that conversations about climate change solutions, when we are looking at the Pacific Islands and really anywhere in the world, but I'm most familiar with the Pacific Islands, it should involve islanders who have this traditional ecological knowledge, which essentially is technological know-how. So thank you very much. So I am happy to take any questions with the remaining time.
Thank you, Dr. Levin, for this really interesting research and all the interesting data that you recovered with microscopic and macroscopic remains. So I will let this space for people to ask questions. You can ask questions through the chat, or if you want to ask questions also, like just ask. Okay,
Hi, I
please
didn't
go
want to
ahead.
step in front of anybody. I enjoyed your presentation. I am curious about psychoactive plants. Did you find in your research anything that sort of, psychoactive plants? I mean, I guess there's, what is it, kava? That's the one that I'm familiar with.
So that's really important on Pohnpei. There's a lot of ethnographic work that has been done on kava, or sakau as it is called locally, on Pohnpei. I have processed some samples for reference materials, but I haven't found a lot of it in the archaeological record, unfortunately. So it does produce, sakau does produce a lot of starch. But one of the problems is a lot of the pounding stones that are used for the starches, a lot of pounding stones that are used for kava, they're big and open and out there. And so in kind of some early proof of concept work, I tried to extract starches from a pounding stone that had been used the day before. There was a ton of starches on there. I tried to extract it from some ancient stones, nothing. So I think it had just been exposed to the elements too much. So basically, to make that long answer short, I haven't seen any evidence, but it certainly is something that is used a lot on Pohnpei, at least.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, I would like to know, I think it's quite interesting, this idea of the museum, and also I would like to know, like, how, if you had the chance during your fieldwork to like have this conversation with the locals about what happened in the past, and see like this contrast or maybe like continuation of some practices with the people they get, like what was their perceptions about the data that you are collecting, about the results that you find in these studies?
People have generally been, I've generally seen a really positive reception, and people are very interested. So like the Nanwarki, or the chief of Pingalap, has taken particular interest in some of it, and he has a lot of his own ideas. So he takes it and he tries to connect it to some of his own ideas, which I think is great, honestly. And I think a lot of people, they know their history. They like being able to connect, to better understand what had been going on in the past, and to connect that to the present. So the reception has been pretty positive, I would say.
Thank you. We had a comment in the chat. Oh, okay. Savannah is saying thank you for the presentation, and she really enjoyed the topic about phytoliths that she was not familiar with. Okay, we have another one, another question in the chat. Nina Peck asks, do you have a favorite plant from Pompeii?
Oh, I love that question. Honestly, I love breadfruit. I'm not the biggest fan of the fermented breadfruit, although I'm being like brought around on it, but like breadfruit chips are just, they're amazing. I love roasted breadfruit. Yeah, I would say it's a very versatile plant. I'm honestly surprised that that there aren't people in the West who've tried to grasp onto it as some sort of health food or but it's really tasty. So
Thank you. I will wait for another questions in the chat of if someone want to ask now. But in the meantime, I'm also curious about what like if do you have plans for the future, like future plans of researching plants in this study area?
yeah, so I actually had the first field season of a field school with the Institute for Field Research this past summer. And so I'm planning on holding a field school in conjunction with IFR on kind of an every other year basis on Pompeii. We worked on a new area of Pompeii that we hadn't worked on before, and we're trying to work with the local college there as well to get a lot of the local students involved in that. So, you know, it's really my aim to like to kind of to keep this going, to keep working and to keep better understanding and elucidating information about these food production systems.
So nice, because I think I was looking in the website if I can share maybe the information of the I will share the information of the IFR. So maybe if there is people interested to apply for your fieldwork, now you have the platform to advertise that.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure if the webpage is up now because I'm not running it next summer. I'm going to be running it every other year because it's a pretty small project. And so I would be happy to see. I know that the Archaeological Institute of America also had like a page on it. So I'd be happy to send you what I can afterwards. And then if you want to send it out, do you want to do things that way?
I think what I share the website.
Oh, the IFR Global, yeah. And they have a lot of other awesome programs there too. So
it's not this one, it's another one.
yes, it is this one.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So people can just.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, even though I'm not doing this one this year, they have a ton of other awesome programs. So
Yes. So they can keep maybe they can just like track for the next year, like for 2027 will be.
yes.
So,
So I'm fully intending to carry this out again in 2027.
Great. Someone have questions? Okay, questions in one, questions in two. Let me check the chat.
Yes, can I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Reese, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you know who I am?
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Nice to see you. So I've been working with your PhD and I guess master's mentor, Scott Fitzpatrick, over the years.
Yes.
And in Pompeii for about half a century off and on.
Yes.
We've got a very large book, follow up on our book on Yapping. It's Marshall Islands, on plants, people, and culture. And there's several references to your work in the Pompeii book, of course. There was a question about psychoactive plants, and so we deal with the difference between, as the anthropologist Rivers identified many decades ago, the beetle people in the West and the Kava people in the East. to make it put it generally. So my question to you is that Scott was editing a book for ancient Micronesia, and I think viewers, did you offer one of the chapters on your work on with?
Yeah, the volume that's still in progress.
That's why I wanted to get an update on that and the people that hear to know that.
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that. I finished my chapter a few years ago, and I think he's just been really overburdened. But I mean, I hope that comes to fruition soon, because
I need to get in touch with them again. It's been the same situation with both and Likey on many projects, both personal and academic. But it looked like a very interesting project. This would be a book by a well-known and important European publisher, and it would be entitled in the series on ancient civilizations. This would be ancient Micronesian island from archaeological perspectives. And so I need to get in touch with him. I encourage you to too. You can tell him hello for me. I know he's been following him on Facebook, but he had recruited the major authorities on various aspects, including ethnobotany and ethnoarchaeology, and of course archaeology, for this book on ancient Micronesia. And that's what you essentially presented to the people here today. So I just wanted to touch base. You didn't talk about your LiDAR-related research on taro or the past distribution of Colocasia esculenta and other food plants. So I'll answer the bring the other listeners back into it. There's a plant, the cordyline fruticosa, the tea plant, which is widely used multi-purpose plant and is a famine food. I wondered if you have any further information about its tradition in Pohnpei as a multi-purpose plant, and especially relationship as a famine. Did you pick up any information over the years, whether it's Pingalaphus hardinatos, but Ion in particular?
The tea plant you're asking about?
Yeah, so it doesn't get confused with Camellia sinensis, the traditional tea like coffee, but this is the TI or KI in Hawaiian, and this is important 1,000-year-old plant is one of the terms for it. It grows and grows and grows. It's planted for spiritual connections and food connections, and tremendously valuable plant holding taro terraces together, etc. So I'm concerned and interested in what degree you done any follow-up. Yes.
Unfortunately, so like I personally haven't come across a lot in my particular research, but it certainly is a plant that I've heard people talk about. Oh, and we have a comment in the comment section. Nina Peck says starch grains have been found on Guam, on pottery sherds too. So yeah, I mean, I haven't, unfortunately, in my work to this point, I haven't encountered something, but I've definitely heard people talk about it. So unfortunately, I don't know how much I have to add about that, but I mean, it certainly is one that I wouldn't be surprised if it's been used a really long time. So
right. Back to kava and Phytolus, I believe you have published relative to the use of kava that you found Phytolus, but I believe they're from the leaves and not from the part of the plant, the rootstock, which contains lactones or psychoactive.
Yeah, so the phytoliths, the kava does produce phytoliths in the leaves, but yeah, not in the roots. It's going to be mostly starches from the roots because they're just, and the phytoliths from the leaves are not particularly diagnostic, I don't think.
Can they identify the presence of the kava? That's what I think you're suggesting. Maybe could be useful. Indicating the extent the distribution of kava in the past, perhaps relating to its traditional use, was it circumscribed by only the high chiefs, which we indicated right up until the modern, going out of the sacred to the profane, which is widely used by the average person in Pohnpeian, where that wasn't the case in the past.
Yeah.
That maybe limits the amount of kava that's being grown or being used, and more difficult to pick up in the archaeological record.
That would make sense. Because yeah, I mean, because it is so widely grown now in a way that people talk about, it just wasn't used that widely in the past.
Right, and perhaps overgrown in the uplands and for the last half century, program to try to bring the cultivation back down into the lowlands, and we're careful so they don't disturb and lose more of the tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
Subsequent erosional catastrophes that can happen. Thank you for your presentation. I'll get in touch with Scott if you do too,
Yeah.
both of us, to see what's up with the book. Okay.
Yeah.
Have fun in Arkansas, and I'll let the other students if they have any questions.
Thank you so much. We are a little bit late, but if you have time for one more question, there is a question in the chat, Dr.
Sure.
Levin. Okay. Mike Duron, he asked, have you encountered difficulties with the locals on digging in certain areas or on certain smaller islands of Micronesia as far as clearance are concerned? Sometimes there is a disconnect between what community city leaders authorize versus the attitudes of the rural locals consider okay to do on the land.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we're doing work, we do get, obviously we have our permits that we have to get at the higher level, but there's always discussion with local communities. One of the things that is nice about Micronesia is things are so small that usually if you propose a project, they'll actually go out and they will talk to the landowners and they will say, hey, is it okay? There's these people proposing to work on this land. Is it okay if people work on the land? And so, the larger, the higher level authorities probably would decline if local people were not okay with what was going on as well. So, I mean, I think my biggest point of tension that I've seen often is between, and I don't want to get into details here, but I will say there sometimes is tension between what traditional and municipal leadership think is okay. But I haven't really encountered a lot of issues with rural local people. I just, I try to explain, hey, this is what I'm doing. I try to see if they have interest in it and how they want to be involved, and just talk to people as much as possible. But I think one thing that really helps is just that it is a really small place.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mike say thank.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levin, for sharing with us this time, for sharing your stories in Micronesia. Before closing this student cafe, I would like to remind you all the membership that you can become a member of the Society of Ethnobotany, and we have memberships options for people from non-developed countries. Also, we will have the annual meeting next year in Montpellier. And let me check okay, I think those are my two advertisements. And yes, thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to stop the recording now. Stop.